The Blackwood Forest always carries an air of mystery, untouched and wild. But beyond the dense canopy lies secrets that have never been revealed. Sergeant Aiden John thought it was just another routine patrol until a strange dog appeared, leading him into a terrifying journey he never could have imagined. A missing child, a mysterious bracelet, and shadowy figures moving silently in the darkness. Who is lurking in the forest? And what are they hiding? Join us as we uncover this thrilling story. And if you love suspenseful mysteries like this, make sure to subscribe to Dog Stories today. Your support truly means the world to us. Now let's begin at the moment when it all started. The sun had just risen over the sky of Everwood, casting a soft golden light over the old wooden rooftops and the cobblestone road leading into the heart of town. Though time had brought changes, this place still retained its rustic, untouched charm, like a forgotten corner nestled within nature. In the distance, Blackwood Forest stretched endlessly, its towering trees interwoven like an infinite green curtain. Birds chirped from the branches, signaling the start of another quiet morning, just like any other. Sergeant Aiden John took a sip of lukewarm coffee from his travel mug, his eyes fixed on the dirt road ahead as his patrol car rolled over the crunching gravel. A former military veteran, he was all too familiar with mornings like these, peaceful, still, yet filled with thoughts. After his service, Aiden had chosen to stay in Everwood, continuing to serve in the local police force. The daily patrols were rarely eventful, but with instincts sharpened by years in the military, he always had the feeling that something was worth noticing. Today, Aiden's patrol route included Blackwood Forest, a vast national reserve with a rich ecosystem and countless hiking trails. Though popular with visitors, the forest still held an air of untamed mystery, especially in the early morning, when mist clung to the treetops. The dirt road winding through the woods was blanketed in fallen leaves, and with every gentle breeze, patches of sunlight flickered across the path through the gaps in the foliage. Adjusting his rearview mirror, Aiden's gaze swept over the trees lining the road as his vehicle moved deeper into the forest. He was only a short distance from the ranger station. Out of habit, he assessed his surroundings. Everything seemed normal, except for... His brow furrowed slightly as he eased off the gas. A few meters ahead, right in the middle of the trail, stood a small, unmoving figure. A dog. A German shepherd, neither too big nor too small, likely just a few months old. Its sleek black fur shimmered under the morning sunlight, with warm brown markings on its paws. Its ears were perked but not fully erect, as if it was alert but uncertain. The strangest part? It wasn't running away. It didn't flinch or show any sign of fear as the patrol car approached. Aiden slowly pressed the brake, bringing the vehicle to a stop just a few steps from the dog. It didn't move. Its eyes, deep, intelligent, but carrying a sense of urgency, stared directly at him. Aiden carefully turned off the engine, opened the door, and stepped out, his movements slow and deliberate. He had encountered plenty of stray dogs during his patrols, but this one was different. It wasn't scared. It wasn't aggressive. It just seemed to be waiting for something. He crouched slightly, keeping his voice low and steady. "Hey, little guy. What are you doing out here all alone?" The dog didn't react right away. It only tilted its head slightly, its eyes never leaving Aiden. A light breeze rustled through the trees, sending dry leaves skittering around their feet. Aiden took a closer look. The pup's fur wasn't clean. Dust and dirt clung to its coat as if it had been wandering the forest for some time. But what struck him the most wasn't its condition. It was its demeanor. No fear, no hesitation, no instinct to run. It was waiting. Aiden slowly extended his hand, but before he could touch it, the pup lifted one paw, took a small step forward, then stopped, its gaze still locked onto his, like an invitation. "You want me to follow you?" Its tail gave a small wag, not one of excitement but a quiet confirmation. A strong feeling settled in Aiden's chest. He didn't believe in coincidences. A puppy like this didn't just show up here by accident. Something was off. He lowered himself slightly, his expression calm but sharp with observation. "All right, kid, I'll follow you. But first, who are you?" He held its gaze, deep, expressive, carrying something unspoken. A secret. A name flashed in his mind. Finn. The dog blinked, as if it understood that the name now belonged to him. Aiden straightened, his hand resting lightly on his holster out of habit. Deep down, he knew the danger wasn't coming from the dog. It was waiting somewhere ahead. Finn turned toward the dense forest, took a few steps forward, then glanced back at him. His eyes sent a clear message. Come on. Aiden took a deep breath, rolled his shoulders to shake off the tension, and followed. He knew he was about to step into something much bigger than a routine patrol. As he moved deeper into the trail, his boots crunched softly over scattered dry leaves. The air around him felt unnaturally still, with only the occasional distant call of a lone bird. Sunlight trickled through the towering canopy, casting long, somber streaks across the forest floor. Finn moved swiftly ahead, his nose low to the ground, sniffing constantly as if tracking some invisible trail. But he never strayed too far. Every so often he would stop, glance back to make sure Aiden was still following, then press forward again. And that only made Aiden's gut feeling grow stronger. Finn wasn't just some lost pup. He knew what he was doing. Was he searching for someone? Or was he leading Aiden to something? Then suddenly, Finn stopped. He let out a sharp exhale through his nose, then lifted his head abruptly, listening. Aiden tensed, his grip instinctively tightening around his holster. He didn't hear anything, just the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. But Finn did. His ears stood high, his body stiff for a moment, as if he had just caught something no human could sense. And then, Finn let out a soft whimper, turning to look at Aiden, not just with anticipation, but with pleading eyes. Aiden knelt down, extending his hand, his voice low and steady. What is it, buddy? What do you hear? Finn didn't respond like most dogs would. He didn't bark, jump, or shy away. Instead, he carefully inched closer. Then he pressed his head gently into Aiden's open palm, his soft fur brushing against his skin. You're asking me to help you, aren't you? Without warning, Finn gave Aiden's hand a quick light lick, a gesture of trust. Aiden felt an odd connection forming, not between a man and a stray dog, but between two partners, as if one soldier was placing his faith in another. Then suddenly, Finn sprang forward. With no warning, he bolted ahead, this time faster, more determined. Aiden didn't hesitate. He took off after him. The deeper they moved into the forest, the rougher and denser the terrain became. Giant tree roots jutted out from the ground, forcing Aiden to watch his step. Thick undergrowth lined both sides of the path, their shadows shifting uneasily as the branches above swayed. Finn moved with purpose, not following the main trail but weaving through the thick brush, occasionally stopping to sniff with intense focus. And that's when Aiden noticed something strange. Finn wasn't sniffing randomly, he was tracking something specific, something only he could sense. Aiden's brow furrowed, a deep unease settling in his chest. Whatever they were heading toward, it wasn't just a lost trail. It was something else, something dangerous. What was the trail leading to? Suddenly, Finn froze in the middle of a narrow path. Aiden stopped immediately, following Finn's intense gaze. The pup scratched lightly at the ground, his ears twitching before he lifted his head and locked eyes with Aiden. The air around them grew heavy with tension. Aiden crouched beside Finn, staring at the patch of earth he had been sniffing. It looked different from the rest of the forest floor. The leaves were disturbed, scattered unnaturally. Small branches lay broken, and the dirt had been freshly overturned, as if something or someone had been here recently. A cold chill ran down Aiden's spine. Someone had been here. Not long before we arrived. Finn whimpered softly, his dark brown eyes glinting under the light filtering through the trees. He tilted his head, sniffed the air once more, then without warning, darted forward. He had found something. Aiden tightened his grip on his holster and followed without hesitation. The atmosphere in the forest began to change. The dense canopy overhead wove together like a thick, tangled veil, blocking out most of the sunlight. A thin mist clung to the skeletal branches, hovering eerily in the air. The silence was absolute, suffocating. Only the sound of Aiden's footsteps and the crunch of dry leaves beneath them remained. Finn pressed on, but this time he was tense. His tail no longer wagged with quiet determination. Instead, it hung low. His ears stood sharp and rigid, his body coiled like a spring. Aiden noticed the shift immediately. Finn wasn't just tracking a scent anymore. He was sensing something else, something more than just a trail, something unseen. Then, Finn froze. Right in front of them, a massive fallen tree lay sprawled across the ground, its exposed roots stretching skyward like giant fingers grasping at the air. The soil around it was oddly disturbed, as if someone, or something, had stopped here before. Finn suddenly whimpered, then began scratching furiously at the ground, his small paws digging with urgency, as if searching for something buried beneath. Aiden quickly stepped closer, his eyes sweeping the area with caution. He knelt beside Finn, watching intently as the pup clawed at the dirt, and then he saw it. Beneath the layer of dry leaves and dust-covered soil, a small piece of fabric peeked through. Aiden immediately reached out, brushing the dirt away carefully, bit by bit, until the object beneath was fully revealed. A child's jacket, dirty, old, buried, as if someone had deliberately tried to hide it. Aiden felt his entire body go rigid. He lifted the jacket, shaking off the loose dirt. Despite the grime clinging to the fabric, he could tell this hadn't been here long, maybe a few days. A week at most. Finn whimpered softly, his nose working overtime, sniffing around the jacket as if searching for more clues. But Aiden noticed something. Finn wasn't just curious, he recognized this. He understood what it meant. Aiden's grip tightened on his holster. He took a slow, deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. This wasn't a coincidence. A dog had led him straight here, to a place where a child's jacket had been buried. What did that mean? Someone had been here. And worse, someone might still be here. Aiden swiftly pulled the radio from his belt and pressed the button to call it in. Sergeant Aiden John reporting. Check for any missing person reports in the Blackwood Forest area from the past 2 weeks. A long silence followed. After a few seconds, the dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. No recent missing person reports in the area, Sergeant. Do you want me to expand the search? Aiden stared at the child's jacket in his hands, the unease in his chest growing heavier. No one missing? Then who did this jacket belong to? He pressed the radio button again, his voice low but firm. Expand the search. Check the neighboring counties as well. Finn let out a quiet growl, his eyes locked on the forest ahead. He didn't look away. His focus was locked onto something Aiden couldn't see, and Aiden could feel it now. This wasn't just a simple discovery. Holding the jacket tightly, he scanned the dense woods, the question nagging at him. Was there a child out there in danger? Finn didn't wait. Before Aiden could fully process the thought, the pup suddenly bolted, his agile legs darting deeper into the thick forest. No hesitation, no second glance. Aiden didn't waste a second. He shot up to his feet and took off after Finn, pushing through the dense undergrowth, ignoring the branches and thorny bushes scraping against his legs. This part of the forest was much denser. The thick canopy above wove together so tightly that it nearly blocked out the sunlight. The ground beneath him grew softer and damper, the moss-covered earth sinking slightly under his boots as he pressed forward. Finn moved with clear purpose. He wasn't wandering, he was chasing something. Aiden took a deep breath, his eyes constantly scanning every detail of the forest. He couldn't lose sight of Finn. His instincts screamed that something important was waiting ahead. Then, Finn suddenly stopped. Aiden's hand instinctively tightened around his holster, his sharp gaze sweeping the surroundings. Finn let out a low whimper, then began scratching at a specific spot on the ground, his paws moving urgently, as if trying to tell Aiden something was there. Aiden stepped closer, crouching beside Finn, his focus locked onto the area the pup was sniffing. And then, something glinted beneath the faint light filtering through the trees. Aiden brushed away the layer of dry leaves and dust, revealing a small metallic object, a silver bracelet. Thin, delicate, clearly meant for a child. At its center, a shimmering star charm gleamed, its surface still polished despite the dirt clinging to it. Aiden clenched the small bracelet in his hand, his unease growing. A buried child's jacket? And now, a tiny bracelet left behind in the middle of the forest. What did this mean? Aiden immediately pulled his radio from his belt, his voice low, tense. Sergeant Aiden John reporting. I just found a child's bracelet near the location of the jacket. Are there any missing child reports in this area? A long, tense silence. Then, the dispatcher's voice crackled through. Still no local reports, Sergeant, but I'm expanding the search statewide now. Aiden clenched his jaw. No missing person reports? Then why were these items here? Finn let out a low growl, his ears standing tall, his body going rigid. He took a deep breath, sniffing the air, then suddenly his head snapped in another direction. He had heard something. Aiden immediately stood up, his muscles tense, ears straining. At first, only the whisper of the wind rustling through the trees filled the silence. But then, amidst the stillness, he heard it. A faint but unmistakable sound. Ragged breathing. Aiden froze for a split second. No, it couldn't be. His hand tightened around the grip of his holster, then he turned to Finn. The pup was locked in place, his deep brown eyes laser-focused on the source of the sound. Someone was here. Aiden took a slow, deep breath and stepped forward, each footfall feeling heavier as he closed the distance toward the truth. Somewhere ahead, hidden among the thick undergrowth, a sign of life was waiting to be found. Aiden moved carefully, each step silent. The weight of the moment pressed down on him as the labored breathing became clearer against the suffocating silence of the forest. Finn stayed close, his ears high, his body tense, as if he knew they were only moments away from something important. Aiden scanned the area. Thick bushes obscured his view, but they couldn't hide the feeling that someone was there. The sound of shaky, uneven breathing came from behind a large tree trunk. Aiden stepped over a twisted root, lowering his stance. His eyes immediately locked onto a small, trembling figure curled up at the base of the tree, shoulders shaking with fear. A little girl. She looked about 7 or 8 years old, her clothes torn and covered in dirt, her tiny hands wrapped tightly around her knees, as if she were trying to make herself as small as possible, hoping to stay hidden. Her eyes, wide, frightened, red-rimmed, stared straight at Aiden, uncertain whether he was a threat or a savior. She had been out here for a long time. Finn didn't hesitate. The pup stepped forward, moving carefully, deliberately, making sure not to startle her. Lowering his head, he gave a gentle wag of his tail before softly licking her hand. A simple gesture, but one with incredible power. The girl flinched at first, but she didn't pull away. Her eyes softened just a little, no longer entirely consumed by panic. Aiden kept his voice low, steady, non-threatening. He didn't move too quickly, careful not to overwhelm her. "Hey, you're safe now. My name is Aiden. I work with the police in town. I'm not here to hurt you." The girl didn't respond right away. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Her small frame continued to shake, the fear in her body still overwhelming. Aiden didn't push. He knew from experience that terrified children didn't respond instantly. They needed time to trust. Finn turned back to Aiden, as if waiting to see what he would do next. "Can you tell me your name?" The girl hesitated for a few seconds, then whispered, barely audible, "Ava." A cold wave ran down Aiden's spine. Ava, a name that wasn't on the missing persons list. Where had she come from? And why hadn't anyone reported her missing? Finn pressed his nose against Ava's hand, offering silent comfort. She slowly reached out, brushing her small fingers over his back. A tiny, hesitant gesture, but one that showed she was beginning to feel safe. Aiden's gaze swept the area, still on high alert. "Ava, can you tell me what happened? How did you end up here?" The girl bit her lip, her head lowering, her small hands gripping the hem of her tattered shirt. Then her voice cracked, trembling. "He told me to run." Aiden went still. Who brought Ava here?" He kept his voice calm, steady, not wanting to push her too hard. "Who are you talking about? Was someone else here with you?" Ava gave a barely perceptible nod, but she didn't say more. Aiden looked down at the silver bracelet he'd found earlier, then back at Ava. "Does this belong to you?" The moment Ava saw the bracelet, her expression softened, but only for a brief second. Then fear filled her eyes. I don't remember, but I had to run. He told me to run." Finn let out a low whimper, his eyes fixed on the deeper part of the forest. Aiden felt it in his gut. There was more to this story. Ava hadn't simply gotten lost. Someone had tried to protect her. From something. But from what? Aiden lowered himself beside Ava, his tone reassuring. "You're doing great, Ava. Now let's get you home, okay?" The girl hesitated. Then a sound echoed in the distance. Aiden's head snapped around. Finn growled, a deep, low rumble from his throat. Not just a warning, but a clear threat. Aiden immediately reacted, his grip tightening around his holster, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. The forest remained eerily still, but now the silence felt more menacing than before. Finn's gaze was locked on a single point in the trees, his ears standing rigid, his muscles coiled as if facing something real. Aiden couldn't see anything, but he could feel it. They were being watched. Ava's tiny hand clutched Aiden's sleeve, her fingers trembling, her entire body shrinking into itself. "They're here." Her voice was only a whisper, but it hit Aiden like a punch to the gut. "They?" Aiden whipped his head around, eyes straining to pierce through the shadows between the trees. And then a figure, faint, hidden among the towering trunks. Someone was standing there. Aiden could only make out a vague silhouette, no clear features, no identifying clothing. But they weren't moving, they weren't running, they weren't approaching, they were just standing there, watching, waiting. This wasn't a coincidence. Aiden's grip on his holster tightened, his voice dropping into a low, commanding tone. "Who's there?" No response. Then, footsteps. Behind them. Aiden whipped around, tension coiling tight in his chest. There was more than one. They weren't just standing still, they were moving. Aiden grabbed Ava's hand, his voice firm but controlled. "We're leaving. Now." Finn was still growling, but even he seemed to understand it was time to go. Aiden didn't hesitate. He pulled Ava close, quickening their pace, moving away from the danger, even as the weight of unanswered questions pressed heavy on his mind. Who was watching them? And more importantly, why was Ava so afraid? Finn sprang forward instantly, shooting ahead like an arrow, his ears sharp, tracking every movement in the forest. The trees blurred past, branches whipping against Aiden's arms and face, but he barely noticed. He had one goal: get out of the forest. Fast. Behind them, footsteps. They were being chased. There was no doubt now, there was more than one of them. Aiden gritted his teeth, adrenaline flooding his system as he pushed himself to move faster. Just get out of the trees, then I'll have the advantage. Suddenly, Finn veered left. He darted sharply toward a rougher section of the forest where fallen logs crisscrossed the ground. "What is it, Finn?" Aiden followed without hesitation, pulling Ava close to keep her from tripping. And the moment they cleared the area, a sharp snap, a loud thwang. Something sprung to life behind them, a trap. A hidden snare had been triggered, launching a heavy branch into the air, powerful enough to knock someone off their feet. Finn had sensed it before they stepped into it. Aiden barely had time to process it. He didn't question Finn's instincts. They had to keep moving. The footsteps behind them grew louder, closer. Aiden flicked a quick glance over his shoulder. A figure. Dark, elusive, moving unnaturally between the trees. His instincts kicked in. Aiden whipped his gun around, lining up his sights, and just like that, the shadow disappeared. Aiden felt a cold chill run down his spine. He moved too fast. There was nothing normal about these people. Finn let out a sharp bark, snapping Aiden out of his spiraling thoughts. They were close to the edge of the forest, just a little farther. Then a sound rang out in the distance. Police sirens. Aiden didn't slow down for a second. He scooped Ava into his arms, using every last bit of his strength to sprint toward the faint glow of lights ahead. Finn shot ahead, weaving through the last stretch of the trail. And then, they were out. The flashing red and blue lights pulsed through the trees, their reflections dancing across the leaves, the sirens cutting through the once silent night. For the first time since stepping into Blackwood Forest, Aiden felt his body start to relax. They had made it out. They were safe. Finn stood close to his side, his sharp brown eyes still fixed on the tree line, as if he could still feel something there. A uniformed officer rushed forward, his weapon drawn, but the moment he saw Aiden holding Ava, a dirty, trembling but very much alive little girl, he lowered his gun. "Jesus? We got your call. What's the situation?" Aiden exhaled heavily, setting Ava down, though he kept her close. She was shaking, her small fingers clutching onto his sleeve, as if terrified that if she let go, she'd be pulled back into that darkness. "I found her deep in the forest, but we weren't alone. Someone was watching us." The officer's eyes flicked toward the tree line, his brow furrowing. The woods looked darker than usual, like the shadows were still hiding something. "You sure?" Aiden nodded slowly, every nerve in his body still wound tight like a wire. They weren't just watching, they were moving in formation. And someone told Ava to run before things got worse. At the mention of that, Aiden crouched beside Ava, his voice softer. "Ava, can you tell me who helped you? Who told you to run?" Her gaze wavered, caught between fear and trust. I don't know his name. He found me. He was scared. And then, he told me to run." Aiden felt his chest tighten. She hadn't made it here on her own. Someone had tried to protect her. But where was that person now? Finn, the hero of the night. A nearby officer crouched beside Finn, reaching out as if to praise him. "This little guy is the reason you two are alive, isn't he?" Aiden nodded, glancing at Finn. He wasn't just a smart dog, he had instincts beyond belief. It was as if he was born to protect. "If it weren't for Finn, we wouldn't have made it out." Another officer nodded, jotting something down in his notebook. He deserves recognition for this. But even as Finn was being praised, even as the officers congratulated him, Aiden still couldn't relax. Finn hadn't taken his eyes off the forest. He felt something out there, something no one else could see. And Aiden knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The mystery was far from solved. Aiden stared deep into the forest, where the darkness was slowly swallowing the last traces of the police lights. Who had helped Ava? And what had scared them so badly that they told her to run? But most importantly, who were they? A cold breeze swept through the trees, rustling the leaves. But beneath the whisper of the wind, Aiden swore he heard something else, a faint footstep. He turned to Finn. At that exact moment, Finn let out a low, guttural growl. They're still out there. Aiden knew it. Whoever had been watching them in the forest wasn't done yet. What really happened in Blackwood Forest? Who helped Ava escape? And most importantly, who are they? Drop your predictions in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Dog Stories so you never miss thrilling mysteries like this one. Most importantly, stay tuned for part 2, where a shocking truth is about to be revealed. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.